Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the RxJS workshop. My name is Tracy. In this week's coding challenge, we have the flashcard challenge. The flashcard application presents the user with a number of questions that they can answer and submit each of their answers. And at the end of answering each of the questions, the user is presented with a score. At the top of the screen, we have first a label, which tells the user the current question number, as well as the number of questions in the entire test. Below that, we have the current question. Below the question to the right, we have a next button, which at the start of presenting the user with the question is disabled. Below the next button, we have flashcards, and they're called flashcards because when you hover over them, they rotate to the back and present the user with a different color that signifies that the user is currently hovered over that card. Below the flashcards is the Submit Answer button. To answer the current question, the user clicks on their answer, and there can be one or more answers to a particular question. And then the user clicks the Submit button when they're ready to submit their answer. Upon submitting the answer, the user is presented with an indicator which tells them whether they've answered correctly or incorrectly. Now, once the question has been answered, the user cannot change the answer by clicking on the flashcard. Notice when I click on the flashcard now that the answer has been submitted, the cards no longer rotate. So the submitted answer is maintained. After submitting their answer, the next button is then enabled. And clicking on the next button, of course, presents the user with the next question in the test. And again, the user can hover over and click their answers. And once they've clicked all of the selections they think answer the question, then again, they can submit their answer. And the user can proceed through the test until they reach the very last question. Upon reaching the last question in the test, and notice we're on question 5 of 5, once the user submits the answer to the last question, they not only receive the indicator, which tells them whether they are correct or incorrect, but to the left of the Submit Answer button, the user is presented with their score, their overall score to the test. And notice at the top of the display, the question area has changed to a test complete banner. So that's the way that the flashcard application works. Now let's take a look at the starting code. We have the template for the user interface, the component file. We have a file consisting of constants that make up our test, as well as all of the questions within the test. And we have some interfaces which are used in our code. As with all of our coding challenges, we have a service, and the service is where you'll do the bulk of the work to fulfill the challenge. And of course, you'll be creating observables which will control how the tests are both displayed to the user and how the indicators, such as the correct and incorrect indicator and the score indicator at the end of the test, how those things are displayed. You can glean a number of things from the starting point of the code. For instance, in the component file, we have an interface called VM, and VM is the shape of the data that is being used in our VM observable. And of course, as always, the VM observable is the observable that's async piped into on the template, the application template. Currently, the VM observable is returning an observable created with the of operator, and that's simply returning empty and null values. But again, you can glean from the shape of the VM interface exactly what you need to code in the service and have available to the component file. The service consists of the starting observable called the test observable, which is an array of test items, and it is being derived using the from operator, passing in the array of tests from the app constants file. So it's a very simple application, and your challenge is to create all of the observables which will make the user interface work according to what we just saw in the demo. And also, by the way, there is a function provided called shuffle array, which allows for the shuffling of the answers to each question, because essentially the way that I set this up with the constants is most often the true or correct answers are the very first selections, and the false answers are the ones closer to the end of the display. Now, if you'd like to personalize this challenge and make it more meaningful to you, please do feel free to use your own content in the test object. That is, you can replace my questions and answers with your own group of questions and answers. The only thing that you have to ensure so that the application works properly is that the shape of the test items as well as the array of test items itself should be maintained. That is, the tests should consist of objects, test item objects, which have a QID, a question, and an options property consisting of an array of exactly 8 options or 8 selections. And each of those and the shape of those selections should also be maintained. So each of your custom answers should have an opt ID, a description, an is correct property, and an is selected property. And that will ensure that the application works as expected and the display works as expected. But if personalizing the content of the test is more appealing to you, by all means do override my test questions with your own, so that we don't always see the correct answers being displayed first as the first few cards. I provided this shuffle array function. So that's the starting point of your code. You really shouldn't need to make any adjustments to the template file because everything is already wired up, all of the buttons as well as the async pipe. But do take a look to see how all of these things work, because that's key to solving the challenge. When you run the starting code, this is what the display looks like. And notice at the start, before you start your coding, there's no display of cards and there is no display of a question. However, don't be alarmed. Once you properly code the observables, all of those things should be created. And that's all being handled by the template code as well as the CSS code. You can find the starting code for the flashcard challenge here in this Git repo location. As always, we hope you enjoy this coding challenge and tune in 2 weeks from today to see my solution to the challenge. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. And to stay updated on the latest content from the RxJS workshop, please subscribe to the channel. Do you want to learn more about the RxJS library and many of its features? Please check out my course on the Udemy platform. It's called RxJS Subjects and Operators, What They Do and When to Use Them. You can find the course by clicking on this link on the channel page. Thanks again for tuning in to the RxJS workshop.